situation where you are. Wildfire forces out to evacuate the Simi Valley area. 1,300 plus acres destroyed so far. We are live.
7 fires, 5 counties, 33,000 people running for their lives. Right now, as you're watching this, Southern California is under a full-scale wildfire siege. Flames are tearing across Ventura County, Riverside County, San Diego County, and even a remote island in the Pacific where a single distress flare has ignited the largest wildfire in California's 2026 season. And buried in the National Weather Service data is one reading that explains not just why this is happening, but why the worst may still be ahead. It started with a rock. Monday morning, May 18th, 10:53 a.m., a CAL FIRE dispatcher logs a new incident in Ventura County, the Sandy Fire. 10 acres, 0% contained. At that moment, it's just another brush fire in a state that's already seen nearly 1,500 of them this year. But within 37 minutes, it's at 184 acres. CAL FIRE's update uses a phrase you never want to read: spreading dangerously fast. By 1:43 p.m., less than 3 hours after it started, the Sandy Fire has consumed 720 acres. Still zero containment. And it's heading straight for the neighborhoods of Simi Valley, a city of 125,000 people, 40 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles. Simi Valley police had received a call just before 10:30 that morning. Someone clearing brush with a tractor had struck a rock. The spark from that impact, metal on stone, may have started everything. If you live anywhere in Southern California right now, or if you have family there, what happened next over the following 48 hours is something you need to understand. Because this wasn't one fire. It became 7. At 12:21 p.m. on May 18th, 90 minutes after the first report, CAL FIRE pushed out an emergency update that read like a street-by-street death sentence for entire neighborhoods. Fire is headed towards these roads. Evacuate immediately. And then, 14 street names: Meadow Mist Court, Hazel Ridge Court, Rocking Horse Drive, Meander Drive, Sunnydale Avenue. Families living on those streets had minutes, not hours, to decide what to take and what to leave behind. 200 firefighters were on the ground by 12:30. 3 air tankers and 6 helicopters hammering the fire from above, dropping thousands of gallons of water into the canyons. But the terrain was working against them. Steep slopes, dry grass that hadn't seen meaningful rain in weeks, and wind gusts cracking past 30 miles per hour, pushing walls of flame downhill faster than crews could build lines. By 3:27 p.m., the Sandy Fire had eaten 836 acres. Still zero containment. Then came the wind shift. At 5:12 p.m., CAL FIRE posted a single, devastating line. Wind shift that was expected has begun to influence the fire. The flames pivoted southwest, directly toward Bell Canyon. 39 minutes later, 5:51 p.m., a new order. Fire is moving southwest towards Bell Canyon. Please evacuate now. By Monday night, Andrew Dowd, spokesman for the Ventura County Fire Department, confirmed the numbers. More than 33,000 people in Simi Valley and surrounding communities were under mandatory evacuation orders. Another 10,220 under warnings. 43,000 people, total, affected by a fire that had started from a spark off a rock less than 12 hours earlier. To put 33,000 people in perspective, that's the entire population of a city the size of Key West, Florida. Told to leave. All at once. One home was confirmed destroyed. Andrew Dowd stood beside it as he gave the count to the New York Times, watching a plume of smoke still rising nearby. But here's what most coverage of the Sandy Fire missed entirely. While 33,000 people were fleeing Simi Valley, something far stranger had already been burning for 3 days on an island 50 miles off the coast. And the way it started is unlike anything you've heard. 50 miles off the coast of Santa Barbara sits Santa Rosa Island. 53,000 acres of some of the most ecologically sensitive land in North America. Scientists call the Channel Islands the Galapagos of California. 6 plant species grow on Santa Rosa Island and nowhere else on Earth. The island has been slowly recovering for more than a decade after the removal of non-native livestock that had devastated its ecosystem for over a century. On May 15th, 3 days before the Sandy Fire, a 67-year-old sailor crashed his boat against the rocks on the island's shore. Stranded. Alone. No way to call for help. So he did what you do. He fired distress flares. Kenneth Wees, a spokesman for the U.S. Coast Guard's Southwest District, confirmed that the man launched at least 2 flares, trying to get the attention of passing boats. It worked. 2 separate vessels contacted the National Park Service. The Coast Guard dispatched a helicopter already in flight. When they found him, the man had carved the letters SOS into the ground, the charred ground. It paid off for him, Wees told The Guardian. We were able to get him out of there. But those flares paid a different kind of price. The fire they ignited ripped across the island's eastern half. By May 19th, the Santa Rosa Island fire had consumed 16,942 acres. It became the single largest wildfire in California's entire 2026 season. Only 26% contained. 2 historic structures destroyed: Johnson's Lee Equipment Shed and Wreckline Camp Cabin. And here's why scientists are watching this with growing alarm. Santa Rosa Island isn't just land. It's an irreplaceable biological vault. Those 6 endemic plant species, they exist here and only here. The National Park Service is desperately trying to shield a rare grove of Torrey pines from the advancing flames. These are among the rarest trees in North America. One man's survival may have triggered an ecological disaster that takes decades to undo, if it can be undone at all. Now, while the Santa Rosa Island fire was already the largest in the state, and while the Sandy fire was still pushing 33,000 people from their homes, the siege was about to escalate in a way that would stretch California's firefighting resources to the breaking point. 3 new fires. One day, and at the worst possible moment, the one thing that could have saved lives was deliberately taken out of the fight. May 19th, a day that will define California's 2026 fire season. 11:24 a.m. A fire ignites in the Santa Ana River bottom near Bain Street and Limonite Avenue in Jurupa Valley, Riverside County. 20 acres in heavy fuels. The Bain fire. Moderate rate of spread. Additional resources requested. 56 minutes later, 12:20 p.m. A second fire erupts 40 miles to the southeast. Verona Road and Juniper Springs Road. The unincorporated communities of Green Acres and Homeland. The Verona Fire. CAL FIRE describes it as burning at a moderate to dangerous rate of spread in heavy fuels. 40 minutes after that, roughly 1 p.m., a third fire breaks out in eastern San Diego County near Campo. The Tuzal Fire. 10 acres with immediate structure threats. And it's heading straight for Interstate 8. 3 fires. For hours. 3 different counties. All while the Sandy Fire was still burning at only 5% containment in Ventura County, and the Santa Rosa Island fire was devouring a national park offshore. Southern California now had 7 simultaneous wildfires across 5 counties, stretching from the Channel Islands to the Mexican border. The Bain fire moved the fastest. From 20 acres at noon to 100 acres by 1:39, 250 by 2:11, 600 by 3:09. By 8:25 p.m. that night, it had consumed 1,375 acres. In 9 hours, it grew at a rate of roughly 150 acres per hour. 4 civilians were rushed to the hospital, 3 with smoke inhalation, 1 with traumatic injuries. The fire was racing toward homes on Sunnyvale Drive, Mountain High Drive, and Western Avenue. But here's what made the Bain fire different from every other fire burning that day. Here's what turned a dangerous situation into something far worse. During the most critical period of the firefight, when aircraft were making the difference between the fire reaching homes and being held at bay, CAL FIRE Captain John Clinging-Smith confirmed that at least 3 civilian drones appeared in the airspace directly above the fire. Every single firefighting aircraft was grounded. For 10 to 15 minutes, at the worst possible moment, the helicopters and tankers that were protecting those neighborhoods sat on the ground. Because it is a federal crime to fly a drone in an active fire zone, and because a drone collision with a helicopter dropping water over a populated area could be catastrophic. 10 to 15 minutes. While a fire was growing at 150 acres an hour, while 4 people were being injured, while homes were directly in the path, Captain Clinging-Smith told the Desert Sun it plainly. The drones were spotted, and the aircraft were pulled. Period. Meanwhile, 40 miles south, the Verona fire jumped its own control lines at around 7:15 p.m. and began burning again at what CAL FIRE Riverside called a critical rate of spread. A firefighter was hospitalized with minor injuries. A civilian was also hurt but declined treatment. And in San Diego County, The Tuzla fire spotted across Interstate 8. The California Highway Patrol shut down the freeway in both directions. By evening, it had burned 1,000 acres. Now, step back from the individual fires for a moment, because there's a number that puts all of this in a context nobody is talking about. 40,848 acres. That's how much of California has burned so far in 2026. Across 1,479 separate wildfires. 7 structures destroyed. And the state hasn't even entered what fire agencies consider the traditional peak of fire season. That number, 40,848, is significant because of what it tells you about timing. In a normal year, Southern California's worst fire weather arrives in the fall, during Santa Ana wind events. What's happening right now is a May siege. The vegetation moisture readings that determine when the landscape is ready to ignite are approaching the threshold weeks earlier than usual. And that brings us to the data point we mentioned at the beginning of this video. Ryan Kittle is a meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Oxnard, the office responsible for fire weather forecasting across much of Southern California. He told the Los Angeles Times something that should concern every person living in fire-prone terrain between Santa Barbara and San Diego. Right now, the latest readings show we're right on the cusp of when most of the plants are ready to burn. It's still kind of a mixed bag, but we're getting real close. On the cusp, that means what's happening right now, 7 fires, 33,000 evacuated, a national park burning, is happening before the vegetation has even fully dried out. When those moisture levels drop another few percentage points, the same spark that started the Sandy fire won't produce 1,700 acres. It could produce 17,000. But California isn't the only place burning. The National Interagency Fire Center's Situation Report from May 19th logged 69 uncontained large fires burning 483,914 acres across the United States. Nearly 500,000 acres. Nationally, 26,568 fires have burned more than 1.9 million acres so far in 2026, well above the 10-year average of 1.08 million. For the roughly 25 million people living across Southern California's fire-prone counties, this isn't an abstract trend. This is the new baseline. And as we're about to see, the human cost of this particular siege is measured in more than just acreage. Ron Wexler is a resident of Simi Valley. He watched the Sandy fire from his neighborhood as it moved through the hills. When the flames reached his block, he saw his neighbor standing in the street, watching, unable to do anything. The poor guy was standing out in front watching his house burn down, Wexler told ABC 7 Eyewitness News. You couldn't do anything for him. One sentence, and in it, the entire weight of what a wildfire does to a person. Not the statistics, not the acreage, just a man standing in his front yard watching everything he owned disappear. Meanwhile, Cal Fire listed the shelters. Rancho Santa Susana Community Park for families. Ventura County Fairgrounds for large animals. The Simi Valley Animal Shelter for pets. For elementary schools, Crestview, Mountain View, Hillside Middle, Hollow Hills, sheltered students in place, suspending outdoor activities and preparing for evacuations that they hoped wouldn't come. Across Riverside County, the La Sierra Senior Center became an evacuation point for Bain fire evacuees. In Hemet, West Valley High School opened its doors for families fleeing the Verona fire. The Western Riverside Animal Shelter had to be evacuated itself. These are the details that don't make the national headlines. The schools that went into lockdown. The animal shelters that needed saving. The man watching his house burn who no one could help. But behind these personal stories, there's a firefighting operation of staggering scale, and a set of challenges that reveal just how thin the line between containment and catastrophe actually is. 750 firefighters on the Sandy fire alone. Over 100 on the Bain fire, with 22 engines, 2 dozers, 4 hand crews, and 2 helicopters. 44 engines on the Verona fire. Resources pulled from CAL FIRE units across San Bernardino, San Diego, Ontario, and Riverside. Mutual aid stretching across the entire southern half of the state. Andy Van Siver, the public information officer for Ventura County Fire, made a comparison to ABC 7 that reveals just how different this siege could have been. That was one of the challenges with the Palisades and Eaton fires, he said, referencing the devastating January 2025 firestorm that killed at least 31 people and may have caused over 400 attributable deaths, according to a Boston University study. The wind was too strong for the air tankers and some of the helicopters. At the Sandy Fire, winds were strong, gusts over 30, but not extreme. That gap, the difference between 30-mile-an-hour gusts and the 70-plus that drove the Palisades and Eaton fires, is the difference between a city that evacuates and a city that burns. Van Siver continued, "We're in a good spot right now. We have multiple resources in the air, and they're making good work. Good work. Because the aircraft could fly. Because the winds hadn't crossed that threshold. But the terrain fought back in other ways. Steep canyon slopes funneled winds unpredictably. Down canyon drafts pushed flames in directions that models struggled to predict. The Sandy Fire flared north on Tuesday, jumping Sequoia Avenue. Division Chief Nick Cleary warned that Wednesday would bring another dynamic day, with crews focused on keeping the fire from reaching the Santa Susana Field Laboratory and the canyons of Box, Bell, and Woolsey. And at night, when most fires quiet down, CAL FIRE kept helicopters in the air. Night flying water-dropping operations targeting hotspots that could reignite. An operation that requires specialized training and equipment that not every fire department in the country can deploy. What happens when you're fighting 7 fires across 5 counties simultaneously? You run calculations. Which fire gets the next available tanker? Which community is most at risk right now? Resources aren't infinite. Every helicopter sent to the Bain Fire is a helicopter not over the Sandy Fire. Every engine crew assigned to the Tuzal Fire is a crew not available in Riverside. This is what a siege does. It doesn't just burn. It forces impossible choices. And the choices ahead may get harder because of what the forecast shows for the next 48 hours. At 2:40 p.m. on May 19th, CAL FIRE posted an update on the Sandy Fire that included one sentence firefighters were dreading. A forecasted wind shift remains a concern. This matters. The Sandy Fire's containment, that fragile 5%, was built on lines established during favorable overnight conditions. A wind shift doesn't just push fire in a new direction. It can turn a fire's flank into a new head. Containment lines built facing one direction become useless when the wind swings 90 degrees. Division Chief Nick Cleary was specific about the threat vectors. The Santa Susana Field Laboratory, a site with a complicated history of nuclear and rocket testing. Box Canyon, Bell Canyon, Woolsey Canyon. These aren't empty wilderness. These are canyons with homes, with history, with people. And the weather data supports the concern. The National Interagency Fire Center's weather outlook showed relative humidity across California lowlands dropping to 5 to 15%. Temperatures remaining well above normal. Winds shifting and gusting. 5% humidity. To put that in human terms, the Sahara Desert averages about 25%. The air across parts of Southern California is forecast to be drier than the desert that covers most of North Africa. Across the siege, the Verona Fire sat at 0% containment after jumping its own control lines Tuesday evening. The Tuzal Fire had already spotted across a major interstate. The Bain Fire's 10% containment held, but with wind shifts forecast, every percentage point of progress was provisional. And here's the thing that makes this siege different from a single fire event. When you have 7 fires burning and the weather deteriorates, you don't get 7 separate problems. You get a compounding crisis. Resources already stretched thin get stretched thinner. Mutual aid requests compete with each other. The margin for error, already razor thin, disappears entirely. Remember, Ryan Kittle at the National Weather Service said the vegetation is on the cusp. The fuels aren't even fully primed yet. This siege is happening during the warm-up act. The main event, peak fire season, hasn't started. Here's the pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. In 2020, California burned over 4 million acres in a single season. In 2025, the Palisades and Eaton fires killed at least 31 people by official count, though a Boston University study published in August of that year estimated the true toll at more than 400 attributable deaths, making it one of the deadliest fire events in American history. Now, in 2026, the state entered the year with extreme heat and minimal mountain snowpack. A Wired investigation by Brian Kahn put it bluntly. California's wildfire season is already overactive. Utility Dive called it an ominous start. The numbers tell the same story. Nationally, 1.9 million acres have burned through mid-May, 77% above the 10-year average of 1.08 million acres for the same period. California alone, 40,848 acres across nearly 1,500 fires, with 0 fatalities so far, a statistic that owes more to lucky wind speeds than to reduced risk. Andy Van Siver at Ventura County Fire said it directly. The difference between the Sandy fire and the Palisades disaster was wind speed. Not preparation. Not technology. Wind. If those gusts had been 40 miles an hour faster, the aerial fleet stays grounded, the containment lines never get built, and the story we're telling right now is fundamentally different. California has a term for what's happening, a wildfire siege. Multiple fires burning simultaneously across large geographic areas, overwhelming the capacity of any single agency to respond. The state has seen it before. October 2003, when 14 fires burned 750,000 acres and killed 24 people. October 2007, when 9 fires consumed 500,000 acres. August 2020, when lightning struck thousands of times across Northern California. This May 2026 siege isn't at that scale. Not yet. But it's happening earlier in the season than any of those events. And the conditions that created it, the heat, the drought, the dry fuels, the wind, aren't going away. They're intensifying. For the 25 million people living across Southern California, this is the reality now. Not a question of if your community faces an evacuation order. A question of when. As of right now, the Sandy fire sits at 1,700 acres and 5% containment, with a wind shift that could rewrite those numbers overnight. The Bain fire holds at 10%. The Verona fire at 0. The Tuzla fire has crossed Interstate 8. The Santa Rosa Island fire, 16,942 acres of irreplaceable ecology, burns with only a quarter of its perimeter under control. 7 fires. 5 counties. 33,000 people displaced. 6 people injured. 7 structures gone. 750 firefighters on 1 fire alone, with resources pulled from across the state. And according to the National Weather Service, the vegetation across Southern California is right on the cusp of when most of the plants are ready to burn. This is a fire siege, and the conditions that created it, the heat, the dryness, the wind, the millions of people living in fire-adapted landscapes, those conditions are not resolving. They are deepening. Every week the season advances, the fuel moisture drops another tick. Every tick makes the next ignition more explosive. The next 48 hours will determine whether this siege stabilizes or expands. The forecasts are not encouraging. We're monitoring this in real time. If something changes, you'll see it here. Stay safe. Stay ready.